Hello, everybody. It is Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome. Welcome to another video over here on That's Comical. I'm glad that you're all with us today. And of course, if you're watching and it happens to be a Wednesday, happy new comic book day. So I am very excited for today because I'm bringing a good friend of mine. She has shown up on my channel, my old channel, many, many times. And I have actually joined her on her channel. This is my friend, Gabby. Her channel just went through a name change. It is now Geeking with Gabby. And I gotta say, Gabby, this name change is gonna suit you very, very well.
Yes. I just turned 21 in November and I just felt like I needed a rebrand. And so I'm excited to sort of be revamping my channel, especially because I'll be graduating in May. And so I feel like I'm going to have so much more free time on my hands in the second half of the year to really spend on my channel using all the skills that I've developed throughout my college career. And so I'm excited to get to finally devote more time and energy into my channel and get to sort of brand it as something that I feel like really reflects who I am in all capacities, which includes Marvel.
Of course, yes. And every one of you out there who are watching, I really hope that you do enjoy the show. So do not forget to leave us a like as well as a comment because we love to talk to you, of course. And if you do enjoy this and want to see other things that are happening here on this channel, do not forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're up to date with all of our latest content. So I have been bringing you guys my thoughts on various comic book movies, but there's so much more to go through when it comes to these films. So Gabby and I have talked about MCU movies on and off YouTube so many times, and I felt that she was the best person to bring on to That's Comical to have this discussion. So I'm just hoping that this will not necessarily be the last one, Gabby, because listen, as someone who can tell you it's great to see you moving into the next step of your life, but once you get that job, it is going to get tough to find that free time. But as the Merovingian said in the second Matrix film, we cannot have the time unless we make the time. So knowing you and the things that you enjoy, you will definitely be making the time. Before we go into the 2021 slate of Marvel films, I actually want to ask you an interesting question. Because of where we are right now amongst the pandemic, because you and I have had many discussions on YouTube about the pandemic, what were your theater-going experiences? Because I'm pretty sure that you went to see these movies in theaters.
Yeah, I did. So I think one of the things definitely I've had a wide range of theater-going experiences because I have my home in the suburbs, and then I also live in the heart of Chicago in the South Loop, and that's where I'm currently at right now. I saw Black Widow in July in the suburbs, and so we were in a bigger theater because we were seeing it in IMAX, so there was a little bit more people around, and so that wasn't too bad because around July with the pandemic going on, I think more people were starting to feel comfortable going to theaters. And I think they were even starting to drop mask mandates if you were vaccinated. And it was sort of that period where we started to feel oh, maybe we're out of the woods. And now here we are. And then I saw it and, saw Shang-Chi and the Eternals in movie theaters in Chicago. And both of those were pretty decently packed. So in a lot of these theaters, because they're Marvel movies and I'm seeing them around opening weekend for all of these movies, the audience size was decent, but I think most people were wearing masks, thankfully. And I felt it was a safe theater going experience. But I definitely think the movie theater that was the most packed was probably No Way Home. I saw that on the Saturday that it came out because I was just the earliest I was able to see it. And I think the biggest thing too is that I was glad about is that with all of these movies, I was able to have that theater going experience where you're getting people's reactions and hearing the excitement and the gasp and the cheers and everything that I think makes watching these movies so exciting. And so I'm grateful that I at least had that because I feel it would be weird, to watch some of these movies in an empty movie theater and when those big moments happen and there's no reaction.
That's awesome that you actually were willing to go and see these movies on opening weekends and be with the crowds. We didn't do the exact same thing, my wife and I, also because everybody out there already knows because of the fact that my wife and I are expecting a baby.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you so much. We just wanted to make sure that we played it as safe as possible. And we went to go see all the Marvel films after opening weekend because we knew we would see them with a smaller group of people. We also would go and see earlier showings because we're people that want to go see things early because the prices are actually kind of less expensive. So that's one of the things that we do.
I did as well. And I was
Yeah.
still surprised even when I went to earlier showings, like noon showings, I think was the one that I went to for No Way Home. Like there was still not a like super packed crowd, but I think like a decent crowd of people.
Yeah, we ended up seeing No Way Home 3 weeks after it premiered because we knew that this movie was huge and people were still going to see it. But the day that we went was on New Year's Day 2022. So the movie theater that we were specifically in was probably something that could fit about 200 to 250 people. And I am pretty certain there was no more than 35 people in that theater. So everybody was spaced. And because we were officially into the Omicron stage of the pandemic, we were told that we had to wear our masks throughout the entire screening, throughout the entire film. So yeah, we also are, my wife and I, no longer wearing any other mask unless it's KN95. So yeah, it was uncomfortable, but I was just saying to myself, you're in the theater, you're watching the biggest movie of 2021, just forget about it and you'll be fine. And I'm just glad that I continue to see these movies in theaters because the truth is, that's the only way you can and should see those movies, especially when they're first coming out, because I saw Wonder Woman 84 streaming and not in theaters, and I did enjoy it, but I had a feeling that if I would have seen it in theaters, I probably would have loved it and not just enjoyed it. You know what I mean? I would have had an amazing time. So these big screen opportunities, I'm glad they're here. I have a feeling we're not going to see them go away with the current state at this point in time. I think that companies are going to decide which movies are going to go into the theaters, knowing that they are going to do very well, because right now, when you take a look at the fact that Spider-Man No Way Home has been in theaters for a month now, and it's still making the money that it's making, the pandemic is not necessarily something people are waving a finger at right now when it comes to movies that aren't doing well in the box office, you know?
I think it's also just interesting to see like what movies have moved to streaming. Like Pixar has had like all of its releases pretty much straight to Disney Plus, which is
hurts my heart.
So
it hurts my heart.
Yeah, to see that like Marvel is the company because they're these big like action movies that they know where they're going to draw in money, but I feel like Pixar would do, just like any Disney movie would, I feel like. And so that's definitely been something that surprised me. I know that's taking a little bit of a detour, but
no, it's still a Disney property, so we're still in the Disney realm. It's because of the fact that I think it's because people are still afraid to bring their children to the theaters, because my wife and I did go see Encanto, and we really did enjoy that film. We did. Yes, so let's get started with the first of the discussion pieces today, and that, of course, is a movie that many Marvel fans, at least of the MCU, were begging Marvel to finally give us. And it was a big movie for me this year because this was my first movie theater experience in almost 2 years. And that, of course, was the start of MCU Phase 4, Black Widow, of course, starring Scarlett Johansson once again, and a few other great actors, including Rachel Weisz and Ray Winstone and Florence Pugh, and of course, Stranger Things, David Harbour. So this was a very interesting movie because of the fact that it takes place after Civil War and before Avengers Infinity War. So
it feels more like a Phase 3 movie than a Phase 4 movie.
To a certain degree, I will definitely agree with you. But I was going into this movie expecting to have a really good time. I was expecting a lot of action, and I was just expecting a great performance from Scarlett Johansson because this is a role that she's been playing since 2010's Iron Man 2. Right. So what did you think about it overall? And then we can go into some of the details.
Yeah, I thought it was good. I haven't I went through and I was talking with two of my friends about Marvel, and they're like the people that I normally go and see like all Marvel movies with, or at least try to. And I had put Black Widow at the bottom of my list in terms of like all of the like MCU properties that have come out in 2021, including the shows. And I enjoyed it, but I think like I walked out of the theater and I didn't feel the way that I normally do about a lot of Marvel products. And I think like the aspects of this movie that sort of made it suffer for me is that, for one, like it had to be delayed like a year and 2 months because of the pandemic, which is not the fault of the movie. But then when you go in and you get a story which sort of is like a prequel story in some way, because Black Widow's journey, like we saw what happened to her in Endgame. And so going back and then sort of like filling in some of the blanks and getting to sort of meet her family. Like, I think the biggest payoffs of this movie is Yelena as a character. At least like that was the highlight for me. Like, I think Florence Pugh is absolutely going to crush it in like this next phase. And I'm very excited to see what they do with her character going forward. And we've already gotten to see a little bit more from her character in Hawkeye. And so like, I definitely love the family aspects of this movie. And I think there's a lot of really strong messaging sort of about like what it means to sort of be a woman, a lot of women who sort of been controlled by men and losing their free will, and like a lot of like, you know, the messaging about the Black Widows that I found to be very powerful. But I think definitely overall, when I walk away from this movie, I think it's sort of the payoff of these movies. Like, what is it building towards? What is the bigger picture and how it contributes to the bigger picture? And I feel like that used to not be as big of a deal maybe in early Marvel days because people didn't know what the bigger picture was. But after just wrapping up this big, huge Infinity Saga, after all of that point, now everyone I think is sort of in the mindset of like, how does this movie add to the bigger picture? How does it move us somewhere? And I think like this film, it doesn't do that, and it doesn't have to. Like, it can still be a good movie and do that. And I think like if you like Marvel movies, like you're generally going to walk out and you're going to enjoy them because Marvel knows what it is and knows its style and knows how to balance like the action and the comedy and the emotion and the drama and everything. But I don't know, I just sort of walked out of this movie and I was like, I enjoyed it because it's Marvel and it has all the like qualities that make it a good Marvel movie. But I think like even the villain too, and you could talk about like Taskmaster and that character in the comics versus the way that it was portrayed in the movies. And I think just some of the plot things, like I just sort of, I didn't feel less down by it necessarily, but I just think like it wasn't like one of my favorite Marvel properties. Like I think there was more that like.
Well, the funny thing about Black Widow is this is a character that has been in comic books since the 1960s and never really was a character that even had its own title. I mean, Black Widow or Natasha has been featured in many crossovers, many Avengers comics because she, of course, was an Avenger. She has teamed up with other superheroes like Daredevil. So she is a character that a lot of people knew, but more so from an ensemble perspective in the comics and not necessarily as her own title. Now, because of her popularity, she has her own title at the moment, and it's about 15 issues in, and it's selling. People are enjoying it, so I'm glad about that. And did we necessarily need to have Black Widow's solo movie? The answer is possibly, but possibly not. For me, what I really appreciated about this film was there were so many inklings to Natasha's story in the MCU going all the way back to the first Avengers film. And I think what this was we finally got to hear this MCU story in whole that we were all questioning, like, what's the Red Room? What are all these flashbacks that we're seeing in Avengers Age of Ultron? Like, what? Yeah. So I think that that's the main reason why we did get this movie. And I'm glad that we did because I feel the best thing about Marvel characters that are not as popular in the comic books, this gives the creators of the film to be a little bit more liberal with a couple of things about the character. They'll keep to the true pieces that make those characters noticeable and favored in the comics, but they will have a little bit of room to play. So we really got a great story. I think that the first 20 minutes of the film are incredibly powerful, especially when you see the topic of family. I don't know,
like opening credits too, like the whole credit sequence that like, you don't really get like an end credits the way you do, like for example with Endgame, you get this like really interesting, really like visually stimulating, like almost like horrifying to watch, like credit sequence. It's super dark, but it's
I don't know if you knew this, but did you know that girl who plays young Natasha at the very beginning of the movie, that is the daughter of famed actress Mila Jovovich?
Oh wow. Yeah. I feel like maybe that was something that I heard in passing, but definitely like yeah.
Because my wife and I were watching that movie and I didn't tell her right away, but I whispered to myself, I said, why does that little girl look so much like Mila Jovovich? And what my wife loves to do at the end of a movie that we see is she likes to go onto the internet and look for a couple of fun facts. And she said, did you know that the girl who played young Natasha was Mila Jovovich's daughter? I was like, I knew it. I knew it. But what I really liked about the beginning of that movie was it felt very Captain America Winter Soldier. It was very
Yes.
dark. It was full of action. It had so much drama. And I was like, okay, I'm liking this, because one of my big peeves that I've been having with most Marvel movies lately is I want one of those truly dark and truly serious movies.
Yeah.
And then the jokes started to come. I mean, I know that people love the comedy, but I don't know about you, so feel free to disagree. My major issue with this movie was the fact that they really, to me, forced those jokes that really, to me, I didn't think they were supposed to be there. I wanted a truly great dramatic story. I mean, my wife loved the jokes where I couldn't stand those Yelena Pose jokes. I thought they were so cheesy. I was like, no, I want this.
Endearing, but like I think it's part of her character, and I think also just like Florence Pugh as an actress and maybe some of her like personal choices as well. I always like the comedy side of Marvel as well, and I feel like it sometimes balances very well and it gives you like a relief of this tension. But I do agree, like Marvel can do, and I think they're building up to doing some darker and grittier stuff, but maybe like weren't fully ready to do that yet. I know I've recently like not to like tangent, but just sort of like relevant to this, I've started watching Daredevil, and we can sort of talk about like why that is. In terms of
like, I think I know why.
Yeah. And so like I've only, oh my gosh, I don't know how many episodes in, maybe like halfway into the first season. And I knew, and I got like heard some warnings that was like, oh, it's violent, but like I was not fully prepared for how like intense and like insane that show is going to be in terms of the violence and some of like the really visual things where they like show it to you. Like, you like see someone's decapitated head, you see someone like impale themselves, like, and it's like they don't like shy away from it at all. Like it's right there in front of you. And obviously that's Marvel Netflix, so I think they have a lot more liberties to do that. Whereas like, you know, unless Marvel wants to be rated R, and then are they like, you know, so I think there's a lot more.
They took a lot from Frank Miller's run on Daredevil, hence the black costume that he wears in that show. That is right out of that comic book, and Frank Miller is one of the darkest comic book writers in history. So I'm glad that you're watching those shows, because they definitely were interesting shows, especially when you take a look at them compared to the movies. I also am going to say that I didn't go berserk with the whole thing with Taskmaster, because, you know, I don't know why I watch all of these crazy things happening on Twitter, but the truth of the matter is Taskmaster was not even a character that I even was familiar with in the comic books. So they gender bent the character, you know, so what? You know, it played into the story, especially because she ended up being Draco's daughter. Or I think I got his name right. Dracov's daughter.
Payoff there, like in the Avengers, like where Loki has that line about like Dracov's daughter. So I was like going back and even seeing the payoff of that, I think was nice. But
the funny thing is, because of the Black Widow movie, now Taskmaster is showing up as his original self in the comics a lot more often right now. So clearly, because of this has caused a spur in loyal comic book fans saying, please give us Taskmaster the right way, I guess. That's what they're saying. I mean, I'm not one of those people because I'm not reading those books right now. So, but, you know, Taskmaster was a character that I wanted to learn a little bit more about. So I was appreciative that they sort of kind of made this character a little bit relevant, because I always say that one of the biggest problems that Marvel movies have most of the time is they never get the villains right. Though I think they did, even though he wasn't in the movie much. Dracov was a great third act, because I like Ray Winstone as an actor. He's a great actor, and I was very happy that they chose him to play this character, and I just loved that final showdown between him and Natasha because
Settling the nerve.
Because you got the beginning very, very dark, and you got the end very, very dark. And my God, you know, if there's anyone that really can show her acting chops and take a beating on screen well, that is Scarlett Johansson. She did incredibly well acting-wise in that film. I also, when it came to the jokes, oh my God, I know that David Harbour was trying to be the ultimate dad in that movie, but my God, I couldn't deal. I couldn't. I like him, but I was like, no, please. We had something good here, you know?
Yeah, and I think his character, like, it's especially interesting because his introduction feels very dark. Like, you see, and then like you see him around like these people, or like see him around Natasha and Yelena, like two people he considers his daughters, and the sort of like code switch I feel like almost that happens in the way he behaves differently around them. Same like around other inmates, and sort of the personality switches there. I'm like, that's definitely one thing, is I feel like I'm excited to see more, hopefully, of David Harbour and Rachel Weisz and Florence Pugh. Like, I feel like there's definitely a future for them in the MCU. And so I was excited that this movie took the opportunity to introduce them, because I was also thinking about like one of the lines in Endgame where all of the like core five remaining members of the Avengers are left, because spoilers in case you didn't know, like
that's not a spoiler anymore. We can reveal. If you haven't seen Avengers Endgame at this point in time, you just don't care about these movies, plain and simple.
What are you doing? Yeah, no, but like when they're all gathered together, and I think, I'm not sure who it is that asked, because it's been so long, it's been a while since I've watched that movie, but like somebody asked if she had a family, and I think Steve is the one who responds and said like, we were her family, and it's like, no, she did have a family. And so I think it'd be interesting to like see. Well, I mean, we already sort of, again with Hawkeye, have seen that now there's one of the Avengers that is clued into the fact that she has a family, and so I think that's, you know, so characters in and get to see them again, so that they have more development outside of this just one film, you know.
Now, again, I had a good time with this movie. I thought it was good. It was very enjoyable. It was just a great thrill to be back at the theaters. It really was. I thought the action was fantastic. The motorcycle chase in Budapest was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. Very, very Bourne-esque. But here's the real thing that really upset me about this movie, and you're going to laugh about this. I know you are. Because after that movie was finished, I was like, okay, I can easily watch this movie right after Captain America Civil War.
Yeah.
And then the post-credit scene comes up, and I'm like, no, I can't.
Yeah. No, I definitely, like, that's the one point, is like, I think a large part of me was also feeling like this movie, because it takes place between Civil War and Infinity War, and it's like, you know, like it feels like it belongs in Phase 3 a lot of ways, because like you find out like, oh, the vest that Natasha is wearing in Infinity War is Yelena's, and there's like, you know, like you could watch the movie up until that point and it fits nicely in there, but because again, like there's that desire, I think, from Marvel fans, which I was saying before, that like they want all of these movies to tie into Phase 4, to set something up, to be a part of the bigger picture. Like there's that yearning for that. And if it isn't there, like there's going to be people that are disappointed. And I think we saw that maybe a little bit with like the Hawkeye finale. And obviously, like this end credit scene sets up Hawkeye a little bit.
And that was when I got really upset. I was like, oh, because it was because of the fact that Kevin Feige announced when he was announcing all this stuff that you didn't necessarily need to watch the shows in between movies. But when you see that post-credit scene and you see Julia Louis-Dreyfus come in as this character, Val, who, just in case you didn't know, she is the comic book character Lady Hydra. So there's an interesting thing happening here, because
that's definitely something I'm interested about, because I'm a fan of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And so we have seen like Madam Hydra show up in that show in the 4th season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I think is like, I would say it's maybe up there as one of my favorite seasons, but like I would say technically like the best season that they've put together. And that is like a character that shows up. So then there's a whole bunch of people coming and running and being like, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is not canon in the MCU. And I'm like,
I heard about that. But when I saw that post-credit scene, I was like, okay, I guess I have to watch these shows. I just don't know when I'm going to, but I'm obviously going to have to, because Val and Yelena are actually going to play a much bigger role. You might already know it, but we're going to get into that in just a little bit, because I then decided, you know what? I'll get Disney Plus. I got Disney Plus, and I watched all the shows like in a span of 2.5 weeks.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
and I was watching them as they came out, because I got Disney Plus. it did not last me very long. Like it was the beginning, I think, of my like first semester of my freshman year of college. And I was taking a television arts production class, and we were doing like TV news specials, just sort of like working on like what it would be like to put together like a news special and writing scripts and just like having fun with it. And so we were doing like a comedy parody thing. And like in our segment, we were doing sort of like a stand-up segment, like you would see for like a night talk show. And we put in like how Disney Plus was coming out because it was around the week of its release. And I think it came out on a Tuesday, and then we did that show on a Thursday, and I went back like to my dorm room that night, like 48 hours after it had been launched, and just immediately was like, yep, I'm doing this now. So I'm surprised like you lasted way longer than I did.
It was a gift. I was fortunate enough to get Disney Plus through a couple of good things. I watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier first because that was supposed to be the one that was supposed to come out before WandaVision.
Yeah.
That one was my favorite show. And the reason why it was my favorite show is because it felt like it belonged right with Captain America, the Winter Soldier. And I mean, for crying out loud, Brock Rumlow, that guy that Captain America fights on that ship in Falcon the Winter Soldier, was there. I loved that. But I also said to myself, I know that I believe it's in phase 5 or possibly even phase 4. There is a 4th Captain America film coming, and Sam is going to be Captain America. So if you never saw Falcon and the Winter Soldier and you just went from Avengers Endgame to Captain America 4, you would actually say, okay, great. Sam took Steve's wishes. He took the shield. He became Captain America.
Like, any of the
exactly.
I think obviously some other things, like there's some things that were revealed about Sharon.
That was interesting.
That in like in the show as well. So yeah, I was watching these, I think like in chronological order as they came out. So I watched WandaVision first, and I think like technically like it was the first, not to detour like a little bit, but like the first MCU property that had come out in like a year, and there was like such a big phenomenon for that. And then Falcon and the Winter Soldier happened, and I was talking to 2 of my friends about it, and they like were not, well, they're not going to say that they weren't a fan of the show, but they definitely just didn't enjoy it as much because they were like, it could have been a movie, and it's like, we're getting Captain America 4. Yeah.
It was, but they chose to add a little bit more and split it up into 6 episodes.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, I, as a comic book fan, was very glad to see Zemo back, finally to reveal that he is, in fact, a Baron, because he's Baron Zemo in the comics. The mask, the leopard skin on the trench coat. I mean, have you are definitely a fan enough to actually go on Google and look for pictures of what these characters look like in the comics.
It's wild. And I think they did a really good job of like taking that look and making it look like very sleek and like very fitting for the character. Like they did, a great job.
I would have still embraced it if he actually came full on comics hot pink spandex. I would have embraced it all. The internet
would have lost their minds over it. I mean, there was just a gif of him like pumping his fist that like went so viral all over like the internet, that they put out a Zemo cut like to sort of make fun of like the show and all of that. So like there was a lot of people who were like found love for this character.
Yeah.
And he's been one of my like favorite MCU villains because I feel like he, like we get an Infinity War and that ends up the way that it does. I feel like because of Zemo and like the divide that he puts between
I thought he was a little bit weaker in the films, but I think that because they made the TV show, they really gave him more meat. And that's what I really liked about him.
And like, his game is always very psychological. He's not somebody who's necessarily about the guns and the coming out. Like it's not, I think like that's, you were talking about the MCU villains before. A lot of them are very one and done and don't feel very threatening. And that's maybe sort of the way I felt about like the villains in Black Widow. I think largely in part because again, that's a prequel story. And so we sort of knew like what was going to happen. And it like would be a surprise if there was like something big and like shocking that happened that we didn't know about.
So Lady Val came back and in Falcon the Winter Soldier, and we were introduced to a character that that was the main reason why I wanted to watch Falcon the Winter Soldier. I wanted to see Wyatt Russell play John Walker, aka U.S. agent, and this was a very well done performance from Wyatt Russell. Kurt Russell's son, of course.
Like, love to hate.
But he's interesting because he's not necessarily, he's more of an anti-hero than a villain. Because what's interesting about him is when you take a look at who he was in this show and what he had done for the country, he was a decorated soldier, a true patriot of the country. But just because you do your service, that doesn't mean that you are truly a pure person. He was no Steve Rogers.
Yeah.
The government gave him the shield after Sam dedicated it to the Smithsonian because they went into this as a soldier. We're looking for another soldier. And they said, here's a super soldier that doesn't even need the serum. Look at what we've got here. You know? Right. So that's the thing. They didn't understand what it really means to hold the shield. And that's what I loved. Yeah.
Yeah. This show's exploration of that and like Sam's personal journey, because I think like Sam has kind of just been, for a lot of these movies, like you got a little bit of his backstory in Captain America and the Winter Soldier, but he's kind of just been, I don't want to say like Cap's sidekick up until this point, but he's like been there and been the reliable friend. And I feel like you got to meet his sister Sarah and you got to really like get into a lot of his background. And I think like the timing of this was also incredibly poignant with like you know, what happened in the summer of 2020 and a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests and sort of like, you know, having to pick up that shield as a Black man and feeling, you know, like because Captain America is such like a patriotic, like, you know, symbol, and like feeling like the disconnect there and not being sure how to pick up that shield. And even like the rift that him and Bucky have because of Bucky's connection to Cap, and sort of like their disconnect is like the way that like Bucky will never understand like what it is that is going through like Sam's mind as he's trying to like process all of this and put it together. And even the inclusion of like, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name at the moment. I'm going to look it up because I feel really bad if I don't. I think Black Captain America. And
I was just about to talk about that. You see, that's one of the few things that I really liked about this specific show, because this show,
that was Carl Lumbly, who was fantastic.
Carl Lumbly, by the way, has dedicated his talents to comics before. He was the voice of the Martian Manhunter in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, the animated shows. He's wonderful.
As well, and
he is wonderful. Yes. And it is foreshadowing two possible things that are happening in the MCU. It's the Young Avengers, because that specific character's grandson is eventually going to become the Patriot. Yes. So we're going to get the Young Avengers eventually. And because of the fact that we saw U.S. Agent and we saw that Val was connected to him and Yelena, we're going to get a team called the Thunderbolts. And the Thunderbolts is a very interesting team in comics because the original Thunderbolts were a bunch of supervillains that decided to disguise themselves as heroes. The leader of the Thunderbolts was Baron Zemo. Whoa. So that was very interesting. But we're going to see these two teams start to unfold very soon, because we're going to be getting characters like Ms. Marvel very soon. I know for a fact that Scott Lang, a.k.a. Ant-Man's daughter, is going to become a character named Status. We are also going to see, finally, and if this is a spoiler to people, I'm very sorry, but this has already happened in the comics. You all know that character who has been in the MCU. His name is Thunderbolt Ross. He's the Red Hulk.
And I think She-Hulk is happening, so that's very likely.
Yes.
That's probably going to be
That's exactly where we are going to find out that he's going to be showing up. So we're going to get the Red Hulk. He's apparently one of the Thunderbolts as well. So there's some big things happening, and I think that it was the Falcon and the Winter Soldier that really was the pivotal point that is going to branch off into some of these future films and TV shows. So we'll see how it goes.
I think there's so many like entities and possibilities for Marvel too. Like there's just a lot happening, because we also have the multiverse happening as well, which I feel like is like a whole separate like chapter of where like Marvel is going with like What If and WandaVision and Loki and No Way Home, and then we're getting Multiverse of Madness, and so that's like one angle. And getting like Kang the Conqueror. Like, so I was like, there's a lot happening. And I feel like it's going to be exciting to see how all of these pieces build together.
Yes. So let's talk about those three specific shows that you just mentioned: WandaVision, Loki, and What If. I've got to be honest, and I know that there are so many people that can't stand that I say this, but I did not enjoy Loki at all.
You are among the majority. I will be real honest.
But you want to know what? You want to know why? But you want to know why Loki was made? The show was made because, and I am one of them. Everyone loves Tom Hiddleston as Loki. People wanted more Loki. Like, I have to give Marvel credit to just taking that one little moment that happens in Avengers Endgame where that alternate Loki picks up the Tesseract and just goes somewhere.
Yeah.
There were people that were saying, where did he go? But there were some people that were saying, he went somewhere, but what does it matter? Well, clearly Disney Plus wanted to make it matter. So it was a great way to give the fans what they want to a degree, but also give people a little bit more of an understanding of the multiverse. And yes, seeing that specific version of Kang at the very end. I mean, I will not deny the fact that I loved Tara Strong voicing Miss Minutes. I thought that was one of her best voices. I'm a huge Tara Strong fan. I love her to death. But I also was impressed to actually see now we have Owen Wilson in the MCU. That's kind of cool.
Like, I just adore him as Mobius. He just like the jet ski and just like all of the little like mannerisms. Like I just like what a perfect cast. Like
he's great. He's charming, and I'm sure that Luke Wilson is going to show up in the MCU. But I'm going to say that by 2050, every actor on the planet will have appeared in the MCU in some shape or form. That's just basically where we're going at this point in time. But there were some really good performances. I enjoyed Sylvie as a character. I mean, I will not deny the fact that when we saw all those versions of Loki, including Richard E. Grant in I have something to say. You know, as a comic book faithful reader, sometimes when you see these characters come to the big screen, you really wish that they would have stuck to the original costumes. But considering the fact that we saw Richard E. Grant dressed up as that comic book version of Loki, and we even saw Scarlet Witch and Vision in that Halloween costume episode dressed up in that is where the true comic book fans are going to look at this and say, no, this is just wrong. They really shouldn't do this.
I know like Richard E. Grant has talked about his costume and mentioned like, oh, in the comic he has like muscles and there's so much more. And then they were like, no. And I think like, I mean, I know a lot of people are excited about the Halloween episode of WandaVision. I feel like just WandaVision in general, like there's so many people that were like obsessed with that show. And I think just because like a lot of people were Marvel deprived for a whole year.
Yeah, it was different. I liked that show because it was different. I really liked the thing that they did with television. I mean, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, my favorite thing about WandaVision was the fact that they got Kat Dennings back because I love Darcy. She is one of my favorite characters, and she still got it. She still knows how to be funny when she needs to be funny.
Yeah. So this would be like my high hill about some of these things. So technically, like, so in 2020, we got the 7th season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. That's not technically MCU property. So
which is weird to me.
I watched it and actually I was like, oh, Marvel. So I got to enjoy that. And then we get in 2021 and like the first like official MCU like property content, anything to come out and release was WandaVision, which I think came out at some point in January 2021. Yeah. And the internet like exploded with all of this, like Agatha All Along, when that song came out, like it was all over the internet. Like you could not escape it. You couldn't, like, at least for me, like I could not go onto my phone until I watched an episode of WandaVision or the spoilers would be everywhere. And so like it was just like this whole big phenomenon. And I think like this show really like, again, like there was the original order of like Black Widow was supposed to come out first and then Falcon the Winter Soldier. And then the pandemic happened and they had to completely shift everything around. And it's definitely something I've thought about is like, what if we had gotten that original order? And I definitely at some point would love to go back and watch all the properties in their original order and sort of see like what the difference is in comparison to the order that we actually got. But I think getting WandaVision first, like it really showed that Marvel is now sort of thinking outside of the box and sort of what it is that it can do because it knows its identity. Like it knows, like it knows like, you know, like storytelling, like, you know, the balance of comedy versus like drama. And again, like you could maybe personally feel like it's not for you, but they have their style and know like generally what works. And like they know their identity and they know like what Marvel Studios is and what works for them. And so now I think in phase 4 they have a lot more room to experiment, to bring in like characters that maybe people aren't familiar with. Like, I don't think there's a lot of audiences that maybe will be familiar with like Moon Knight or America Chavez or like Kamala Khan, like these characters that are coming into the MCU. Even Shang-Chi, like as of
we'll get to that very
like,
soon.
Characters, the Eternals as well, like bringing in these new people and doing stuff that is just out of the box. But people will watch it and will end up enjoying it because it's Marvel, and it's just like you can count on certain things when you go into Marvel properties. And I think WandaVision was one of those things where they just did something very creative and out of the box and got to sort of pay homage to all these different sitcoms throughout the decades in each episode. And so I guess like I enjoyed watching it for that. I also just watched it and there's a lot of things that reminded me a lot of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And so like watching everyone freak out about the show being like, there's 7 seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. right there. Like, especially looking at the scenes with like Wu and Monica Rambeau and Darcy, which I loved, which were great. But like everyone else like loved those too. You know, as they're like sitting there theorizing in a whiteboard, and it's like, obviously that's what all of us are doing is we're trying to figure out what happened. I know like also one of the things that happened that I think bothered me a lot is there was a lot of people being like, oh my God, Mephisto's going to show up on WandaVision.
Yeah, you're literally taking everything that I want to say right out of my mouth. I'm loving this.
It feels like this big like letdown when it doesn't happen. And it's like the show is still good. It's just like people's hype. Like shows and then like
I mean, I think I remember before I even watched the show that the big thing that made everybody's jaws hit the floor was when Evan Peters came on the show to be Quicksilver.
And I'm
like,
so mad about that.
I was like, were we actually going to get the X-Men from Fox into this world?
It's a boner joke. Like, I was so upset because I was thinking like something big, because obviously like we got the white version of Vision, which was like the big thing that they were teasing. And I think that'll be interesting to see where that goes. And if like Paul Bettany will be showing up in Multiverse of Madness at all, because that's the next time we know we're seeing Wanda. And so if like if that's a potential to bring like that character back, I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, I don't know.
I'm upset about like the whole like that they brought in Evan Peters and then they just did nothing with that. And we know they're bringing X-Men into the MCU, so it was like, we're giving this to you and you know what it is, but we're not going to tell you what it is. And then maybe they'll come back to it. Like, that was.
And I like the fact that we were introduced to the twins, because the twins are also supposed to be eventual members of the Young Avengers. Their characters are Wiccan and Speed. So I'm really excited to see them show up. I personally don't know why Harkness is going to be getting her own show.
I think that was the internet hype. Like, again, the amount of people who like lost it over Agatha all along, that song I think won like I don't know if it won a Golden Globe or an Emmy, but it was award winning. Like, it was a mixture of
the Munsters and the Addams Family song. That's really what it was.
I think the team from Frozen that wrote that song as well, and obviously Let It Go is like, it was like, that's not surprising. And so it was just that, and like people just love Catherine Hahn, like, and I think she's
good.
Like,
she's very good.
And so I think like just the need to like keep her around, and I think it'll be interesting to see more of her backstory. And again, Marvel is in this point now where they can just give every character like side stories and spin-offs and shows, and they know they're going to get an audience for it. So like, why not? You know?
Yeah. I mean, I just want to throw a couple of points out here, because the one thing that makes me very happy about these shows is the fact that we got a chance to get to know some of these characters from the MCU films that really didn't get enough screen times, because we didn't get a lot of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We didn't get a lot of Vision and Scarlet Witch. So I'm glad that we did get that. I also am very curious because, you know, if I never saw WandaVision, would I understand the Multiverse of Madness? Now I can already say, honestly, because of the fact that I have seen Loki and Spider-Man No Way Home, I don't think Loki would have made any difference, because the timeline was kind of sort of explained in that movie too. But still, you know, that's sort of a play on comic books, these shows. It's those filler issues, you know, like there's a big story happening, but sometimes you need a little bit of a breather. So this is what these shows are going to do for you. But these shows, because we're seeing familiar characters right now, eventually, like you said earlier, we're going to be seeing some characters that some people really don't know. Because of the fact that you've seen Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., you know Deathlock, you know the Inhumans, you know Ghost Rider. So you already know a lot of these characters. And Mephisto, you mentioned, that's a Ghost Rider villain. So that's part of the, because that's the thing. We're going to be getting some more dives into the cosmic universe, the magic universe, and the dark universe, which is going to include Moon Knight, which is going to include Blade. So I personally am very excited for Moon Knight because I've always known who Moon Knight is for many, many years, but I actually just read the first 6 issues of the brand new Moon Knight run that is written by Jed McKay, and I just had so much fun with it to the point.
Isaac, I think, is going to do great. Like, what a great choice.
Yeah, what a great choice. And the fact that after reading those 6 issues, there's more issues coming, but the first story arc just wrapped up so perfectly. I was like, I don't really want to read this anymore. This is just so perfect. I don't want this ruined. But okay, so What If? What If is a show, of course, based on a comic book line that Marvel made. And it had actually been on hiatus for a while, but just this year, they made their very first What If comic series for the first time in a long time. It was 5 issues. It was a Spider-Man story called Spider Shadow, and it was what if Spider-Man held on to the alien symbiote just a little while longer. So basically, it's Peter Parker turning into Venom. So it's kind of crazy. But I gotta say, I also was not a big fan of What If. I mean, there was too much death. Way too much death on that show.
That was one of the things that surprised me. Like, I have my ranking for Phase 4, and like What If is at like the 5th position. And I just I don't know why, like, I had so much fun with it. Like, and like, wasn't
there were some great ideas.
Properties. I think it was just fun because it really, like, the fun thing about the show is, like, for one, I think the animation in it is beautiful, and I think like for Marvel to get to do like an MCU animated property and just get to again like expand their reach and do stuff out of the box. I think it's fun. And I think like again just getting to explore all of these sort of what if scenarios with these characters and just do stuff that's sort of fun and outside of the box, while also like I think setting up some big things that are like big for the MCU. I know one of my friends saw No Way Home and she hadn't watched What If, but me and my other friend had. So when we're watching the Multiverse of Madness trailer, and we see like the end of one of those scenes, we're like, that ties into What If. And so now I'm keeping my fingers crossed and being like, I want to see Jeffrey Wright in the MCU. I want to see his face in the MCU. I want to see the Watcher.
Yeah, I'm very excited for the Watcher, and just knowing
Jeffrey Wright was like, what a great choice. Like,
I gotta say, knowing that the Watcher is coming, is already in the MCU, that only makes me more excited for Fantastic Four, because the Watcher and Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, they go hand in hand in the comics always. But there were a couple of episodes of What If that I truly did enjoy. I mean, I am not surprised about that zombie episode because Marvel Zombies is so hot right now. But I personally loved the Doctor Strange episode, and I loved the Thor episode.
The Thor episode was so good. Like, that was definitely one of the more fun ones because so many of these episodes, like, when I went into them, they're so sad and like dark. Like, I think like maybe not necessarily my favorite episodes, but something I still appreciated was the episodes where Black Panther showed up, just because like getting to sort of be with Chadwick Boseman again in that character, because him and I have the same birthday, so like him and I think Don Cheadle as well. So I share.
Yeah, unfortunately, Chadwick Boseman's passing was my birthday, so that's a little sad.
Oh, that's
sad.
Yeah, like that both of us have that weird, but that's terrible. But yeah, like it was just like again seeing his character again on screen, and I think in like such a fun circumstance of like him being like the
Star-Lord. I did like him as Star-Lord. That was fun. Just seeing him interacting with the Ravagers
Thanos, like that moment
and
where
Thanos.
he talked to Thanos, and it was like, I just changed my ways. And all it was like, all it took.
That was crazy. But I also was really happy that one of the few things that What If did that made me very happy was we got so much Howard the Duck.
Yes, that was so fun.
Howard, because
they can do all of these like fun things that I feel like they maybe wouldn't necessarily do in the movies, and it just gives them an opportunity to go wild, which is what I loved about it.
Hey,
even
listen.
At the end, like I was like the cliffhanger at the end with like Peggy and Steve, and like we get to see Captain Carter, and I was like, even that was very well done. Like it makes me excited for them to do a second season and to get to bring in like now all of these new characters, because I think we've had it confirmed, I believe, that like Shang-Chi may be showing up in an episode. And so we're going to get, and maybe some of the Eternals, like we're going to get to see now some of these new Phase 4 players like
That's great.
in this animated show in the second season, which I think is fun. So other than like What If getting a second season, Loki is also another
Yeah.
show.
I'm curious where that one's going to go, if I'm being honest with you. But what I really want is I want a Howard the Duck show, because I think that Seth Green can definitely make us a great show, because Howard the Duck was the very first time that Marvel ever attempted to make a movie in 1986, and it is known as like one of the worst movies ever made. And it's sad to say that George Lucas is actually attached to that movie in some capacity. But you know, seeing him ever since that post-credit scene in Guardians of the Galaxy, I can definitely tell that Marvel is saying, yeah, we're going to do something with this character. I want to, whether it's an animated series or if it's an actual movie, I will be there for it.
It
and
feels like he's just an Easter egg for now. That just
I think so. I think
maybe
so.
Even like the Luxo Ball for Pixar is like, can you find the Luxo Ball? It's like, can you find Howard the Duck? We're just going to put him everywhere, and then maybe.
And even though Falcon and the Winter Soldier was my favorite show, my second favorite was Hawkeye. I had such a great, well, I'm also a huge Haley Steinfeld fan, and I thought getting her to play Kate Bishop was such a great choice.
I was so happy about that cast because I adore her. And her and Florence Pugh together, the dynamic that they had was fantastic. And I feel like that is going to be like, they're going to like pick up that mantle perfectly from Scarlett Johansson and Jeremy Renner. I feel like they're setting up the dynamic between the two of them to sort of be like the new, you know, what we're getting is we're sort of introducing like Sylvie, I feel like is a character that could replace Loki. And we're getting like these new characters that are coming in as we're phasing out, you know, the like original 6 Avengers and sort of giving these new alternatives in the new phase. And I feel like the two of them.
But the big thing that happened in Hawkeye, and I got to be honest with you, I did not see that coming because of the fact that I did watch the Netflix shows. I was shocked to see Vincent D'Onofrio come back as Kingpin. Because
oh my God,
Kingpin,
his presence is
Kingpin,
something else.
I'm telling you something, in the comics, he's a force, I'm telling you. And he's a Spider-Man villain, he's a Daredevil villain, like he's a real threat.
Into the Spider-Verse, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He was also in the Spider-Man animated show from the 1990s. So it was great to see him come back. I'm pretty certain he is not dead. But
like for certain, I feel like he'll be showing up in Echo, which is another show we haven't brought up, but that will be because we've introduced Maya as well.
I am just very curious to see how. Well, clearly we saw another thing, because clearly this dark universe is being weaved into the MCU in more ways than one. So I personally am hoping that Kingpin is going to be a bigger force, and I would love to see him be one of the big baddies in the MCU films. I am absolutely certain he is not going to be the Thanos of the next phase. I keep hearing, because people are wondering like who it is. Some people say it's Mephisto. Some people say it's Doctor Doom. Some people say it's Galactus. So there's so many. Or Kang, yes. There's so many different things that it could possibly be. So let me just say that it's just gotten me more excited. So Shang-Chi. Now, as someone who is a Marvel comic book reader for many, many years, I never even heard of this character in my life.
I will say that I got to go to the Museum of Science and Industry, which is in Chicago. They had like a Marvel exhibit that I think has been traveling around, but it happened to be at the MSI. And so I found my way over there, I think in August or September, and they had like a little bit on that character that was interesting to get to read. But like generally, I feel like he's a character that a lot of people weren't familiar with. Even when I went into the movie, I really wasn't sure like what to expect.
Well, he was a character that came out in the early 1970s. I didn't even know that he had his own title for 10 years. He just got a new title right now because of the movie. So he's now in the pages of the comics yet again. He was obviously created at the time when people were obsessed with Bruce Lee and his films, so it was time to get one of those types of characters in the comics, I guess. But the only thing that I knew when I was going into this movie was this is a character that nobody knows. This may, in fact, be one of the best MCU films. and I
Yeah,
loved
and I think
it.
like I loved it too. Like I have it, I think top 10 like MCU movies. Like
It's a
I
fantastic
loved
film.
it. And I think like one of the reasons why, like, and this sounds like and it's not stupid because I genuinely believe this, like one of the things that I knew about this movie really going into it is like Simu Liu, who plays Shang-Chi, there was that whole thing, and it's like pretty much a non-story, but a lot of people talked about it anyway, about he put out a tweet and was like, hey, an Asian American superhero in the MCU, and then he ends up getting casted in this role. And so it was sort of like the whole happenstance of like tweeting it and manifesting it, and like he put that tweet out to Marvel, and like even just his whole personality. Someone asked him like what he was most excited about for joining the MCU, and he said hugging Tom Hiddleston, and I was like right there with you.
There you go.
And so like I was excited because I knew this was somebody who was like wanted this role and was passionate about it and excited about it. And like when you have that type of energy, you know somebody is going to bring their all, and that you're going to have then like a team of people who are going to be invested as well. And I think like the passion was there, and this movie is just stunning. Like
it's beautiful to look at. It's so much fun. See, this is a movie where when it tried to be funny, it was funny. But that's also just because of the fact that Awkwafina is God's gift to the world.
Yeah, she's like hilarious. I loved her performance as Katie. Like all of her like comedic moments hit, like they were great. And I think like her and Simu play off of each other very well. And I like the fact that they don't have like a romance, you know, it's just like a friendship, and it's like we can have a platonic friendship like among these characters, and that's cool. And I think it's also fun that like most of the properties that we had gotten up until this point were with characters that we already knew and were familiar with, and now this is like the first time in phase 4 that we're meeting like a new set of characters, and this whole film is like entirely new set of characters. And it feels like I compared it almost to like you're driving down like a street, like for me, I'm thinking the suburbs, like there's a street that I drive down that like I can go 40, 45 down, and I can drive pretty straight, like consistent, and keep like my foot on the gas pedal, and I'm just sort of cruising. Shang-Chi felt like getting onto the expressway, and suddenly now we're ramping up to like 60, 70, and we're really hitting the gas pedal and really
getting
into phase 4 and like meeting these new characters and really like detouring away from some of the characters that we already know and are familiar with and exploring some new territory. And I was really excited about that. And I thought this movie was just phenomenal. And I'm so excited for the sequel too, because now we set up the groundwork, and that end credit scene at the end of this movie, like
I'm still trying to figure that one out, to be honest with you.
Like I love like Wong's appearances in this movie too. I think he's a character that a lot of people have come to love because he's just
everybody loves Wong. Everybody loves Wong.
He's fantastic.
I liked, sorry for that, but what I really liked was how they really wanted to make you feel, because like, even though this technically is an origin story, they still wanted you to make you feel like this universe is not young anymore. Like it's been around for a while. So the fact that you mentioned Wong, we saw Abomination, who showed up in The Incredible Hulk, which only makes me want more Hulk movies, for crying out loud. I love the fact that they incorporated the 10 rings the way that they did. I mean, it made me a little bit more angry about the fact that Iron Man 3 was what Iron Man 3 was.
Yeah, but I love Ben Kingsley.
But the fact that we got Ben Kingsley back, I liked that.
That was great. Like it was, and I loved the fact that there's like a payoff for that film, however many years later, and it's really well done. Like it doesn't feel like a cheap shot at all, or being like, let's try to retcon that. It was not like it all fit together very nicely, and like Ben Kingsley did great.
And Wu is not necessarily a straight up villain. I mean, he's not even the Mandarin. That's the thing I want to make. I don't believe he actually is the Mandarin, but would I still like to see the Mandarin in the MCU? Yes, I would, because that's a classic villain. But I really like the fact that this was very similarly to Black Widow, but I think done a little bit better, the concept of family and the importance of family, and knowing when to step up when you believe that someone that you truly care about has stepped out of line.
Yeah, and I think you're really right that these movies are similar, because both, I think, Natasha and Shang-Chi were sort of raised to be like these warriors and these like, I don't want to say killers, but like in a way, like, we're like trained to do some pretty brutal things. And I think that scene with Katie where like she shits down with Sean and they like have that conversation, and it is sort of like a more serious moment between the two of their characters. It's normally filled with like a lot of like lighthearted banter and jokes. It's like, you know, you were raised to be like an assassin, and like that's not cool, like that's not right. like for your father to like train that, like you and the trauma, you know, that you and your sister went through, and like being able to recognize that. Also, like random moment, the moment with her and the arrow, like
Oh yeah.
we can talk about like whether like the logic or like behind it, but like I just thought that was a cool moment for her character, who's always spent a lot of time like doubting herself, and then being able to like put her faith, like even just like side character getting a development and getting a nice little arc like that. I enjoyed.
Isn't it funny about the fact that Awkwafina was in 2 movies that featured dragons this year?
Yes. Oh my gosh, Raya and the Last Dragon. I
love Raya.
I came out of that movie and I loved that. Like way.
I loved Raya and the Last Dragon. Such a great movie. But no, I just think that it was a beautiful film. It shattered all my expectations. I had such a good time with it. I still need to rewatch it. I have it on Blu-ray and I haven't watched it yet. I really need to watch my copy.
Go through and rewatch all of the Phase 4 movies, because I haven't seen any of them since seeing them in theaters. And I feel like I want to just like sit down and be like, let me revisit each of them and kind of like take the time to do it.
But the good thing is, you know, like now when I pick up a comic book, if I ever actually decide that there's an Avengers story that I want to read, because I know for a fact that Shang-Chi has been on the Avengers a couple of times, so it's nice to see that they're putting him into this team. I mean, it was great at the very end to see Mark Ruffalo, and
I feel like he got
see Mark Ruffalo, see Captain Marvel. Like, it was good to see them.
I feel like we're gonna see, like, I think it's been confirmed that we're gonna see Mark Ruffalo and She-Hulk, because we saw him in Mark Ruffalo Bruce Banner form, and so last time we saw him, he was Professor Hulk. So there's some explanation that needs to happen there.
Yeah, there's
Bruce Banner form again.
Yeah, I just hope that She-Hulk, you know, I'm hoping that it's a successful show, because there's been a lot of people outside of people demanding Black Widow film. They wanted a Hulk movie so badly. And the truth of the matter is, the Hulk is a character that's been worked on right now in the comics, and there's been some incredible stories. I don't know if you do read comics, but
Ruffalo deserves it. Like, I think, you know, also that too. But yeah,
I would love to recommend you a comic book if you ever got the opportunity to read it. It came out in 1993. It was a 2-part series called Future Imperfect. It was a Hulk story where he goes forward in time and he encounters his older self, and his older self is a brutal, heartless dictator called the Maestro.
Interesting.
I would love to see a story like that being portrayed in the films, because this specific comic book story that was written by a great comic book writer named Peter David got so much love that in these last 2 years, he's been writing a series of 5-part miniseries as a trilogy called the Maestro series. So I read the Maestro, I read Maestro War and Pax, and the new one, the final one that's coming out is called Maestro War of M. It is great. I love this side of Hulk. It is so interesting to see a character like Bruce Banner, who was truly heartful, filled with heart, and truly good, just to see the Beast truly take over and see what he would become in the future it's so interesting, because the one thing that a lot of people are questioning is, we know what Bruce was like at the end of Endgame, and yet when we watch the post-credit scene, Bruce is in his human form.
Yes.
Well, he had already said that he had been comfortable in the Hulk's skin and found that unity, but what people are asking is, why is he now just Bruce again? Like, what happened? I'm hoping we'll find that out.
In She-Hulk, yeah, that was definitely the question. Like, I think I watched it and I was like, oh my God, Mark. And then, like, it took me a moment and I was like, wait. I was
Something's
like,
right here.
there's like something. And even I think he had his arm in a sling as well, if I remember correctly. So
Yeah.
I was like, I felt like that was intentional, you know, because with Marvel, it's not like they make those types of slip-ups. Like, if they was going to be Professor Hulk, like, they would have had him be that. But, like, I think there's more there. And I know, like, pre-pandemic, one of the last things I got to do was go to C2E2, and I got to see Mark Ruffalo speak. And I think at the time, he wasn't even sure, like, if She-Hulk was going to be, like, if he was going to be able to sign on or not, or maybe he knew and he couldn't say anything at the time. But, like, and he was, like, wonderful. It was lovely to get to, like, watch him speak too. But, like, I definitely want to see more from him.
Me too.
Because obviously, like, he showed up for the first time in the Avengers. He didn't get to do the solo Hulk film that we did get in the MCU, which like, do many people even consider that like MCU canon?
I do, because Robert Downey Jr. is there at the end, and William Hurt will eventually show up in more Marvel films. I personally,
and the Abomination shows up, so
yes,
like it's there. I think they're trying to pull back from it now and like try to find a way to like bring those grains in, but like allow Mark Ruffalo to take that character, because I don't think, you know, like I think it is. I'm so glad that that character like ended up with him. Because he's done such a great job, and I think was able to, like a movie like Thor Ragnarok, I could not see Edward Norton doing. Like he could not.
Yeah, I mean, look, I personally did enjoy Edward Norton in that film, but I definitely agree with you. I just don't think he would have fit with all of these other characters in all of these other films.
That movie, because it also like feels so different from what Marvel is now, and you can tell that Marvel didn't know what it was at the time, and some of the humor in that movie feels a little bit awkward, and it doesn't feel like the Marvel that we know now. And so I think,
well, like, to be fair,
go back and watch those.
To be fair, we can at least agree that it is much better than the 2003 Hulk film, because that movie is a disaster. Okay, the elephant in the room, and I'm really excited to talk to you about this one, Eternals.
Yes.
There were a lot of I mean, this is the lowest rated Marvel film on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
And people were saying things like, oh, it's so woke, it's so weird, like, why, it's so boring. No. I'm like, this was my attitude. I was someone who was going into this movie knowing that this is not a superhero story. These are cosmic beings.
Yeah.
They are a whole different animal. Now, we have been exposed to the cosmic universe because of Guardians of the Galaxy and Captain Marvel. But these are superheroes in a cosmic world. We didn't get enough time to see characters like Ego or characters like the Watcher. There are beings in the Marvel Cosmic Universe that are so damn powerful. And the scary part about them is they know just how powerful they are. I said this in my review of the Eternals. These are beings that can throw a planet out of its orbit with a sneeze. That's how powerful they are. So knowing that we were going to finally get a movie that really gets into what the cosmic universe is all about, I was very excited. These are characters that came out in the 1960s. They were created by, I mean, look, there are people that say that the greatest person in comic books of all time is Stan Lee. I am going to say that is incorrect. The greatest person in comics of all time is the late Jack Kirby, because Jack Kirby is the reason why we have Captain America, the X-Men, Fantastic Four. We have all of these characters, including the cosmic universe. I mean, for crying out loud, this is the reason why we have Darkseid in the DC universe. He created these cosmic worlds. So another thing that I'd like to recommend you, my friend, is you should definitely read Jack Kirby, The Life of the King of Comics. This is this is a biography written as a comic book.
That's so, oh my gosh, I love that.
It's an amazing story, and I love Jack Kirby to death because he is my birthday buddy. So as a comic book fan, this is wonderful. Also, if you want to hear an interesting fun fact, as of now, the due date of my child is May 7th. That's Free Comic Book Day.
Oh, wow.
I don't think it's going to happen, but it would be a celebration for me personally. But that's the thing. This is what I was expecting from Eternals. And honestly, that's exactly what I got. These supernatural, omnipotent beings living in a mortal world for thousands of years. And how do you deal with that?
Yeah. And introducing them now and being like, why, you know, the big question was like, why did they not interfere like during the events of, you know, the Infinity Saga, and like, why are we just meeting them now, and sort of some of the ways that they've been misled. Like, I think the cast for like Marvel's casting department is always so spot on. But I think like it feels like an Avengers movie, but you haven't gotten any of the individual, like, you know, Thor movies, Captain movies, Iron Man movies before you build up to an Avengers movie. Like, you just have these ensemble set of characters and you have to do an origin story for them, you know? And I think like it was done really well. This is definitely a movie that, like, it's coming out on Disney Plus tomorrow, I believe. Like, I
Yeah,
want to go back and rewatch.
as do I.
think there's lots of jumping in the timeline, and you're spending a lot of time, like, at one point sort of reuniting all these characters after they've been split apart for how many thousands of years. And so we get lots of flashbacks and lots of jumping around. And so I think, like, definitely watching in the theater, I was like, I wish, because sometimes when I'm watching movies, I want to, like, pause and process. And I was like, there are moments where I'm like, I want to pause and take, like, that time to process. And so I think, like, because this movie feels like such a beast, in that there's, like,
it really does
of, like, heavy, like, world building and development they need to do, and giving you the backstory for all these characters, and, like, really setting them up and giving them a foundation in the universe. And I think it was done very, very well.
Yeah,
Just like a behemoth, I think. And
yeah. I mean, we had an Academy Award-winning director in Chloe Zhao directing this film. So it's like, how do you go from a movie like Nomadland to The Eternals? And I appreciated the fact that she made it very dramatic. There were very few jokes, unless Kumail Nanjiani was in the room. And I gotta say, I do love Kumail Nanjiani, but I think there were some points in time where his character sort of outstayed his welcome just a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't show up in the final battle at all, and then just came back in the end. And I was like, okay. But, like, yeah, I thought his character was fun, but definitely I was surprised. Like, he was not my favorite. I would say I liked Fastos as well. Like, I like the fact that he just shows up, and it's like,
Fastos is a great character.
A husband and a kid, and he's just, like, living his life. Even, like, his whole scene with I believe it's Hiroshima, right? It's like the nuclear bomb. And,
yes.
Like, how his character, and, like, because he was always a tinkerer, and now, like, seeing the emotional impact that has on him, I was like, that's, like, such a profound, like, backstory to give that character. And I just think, like, he is great. Richard Madden, I think, did a good job.
Well, he's the most beautiful man in the world. That's what I keep saying. Because I remember him from Game of Thrones, but I still remember the first time that I saw him in Cinderella, and he didn't have a beard, and I was looking at him, and I said to my wife, Jen, you and I may be married, and I may be a straight man, but that man is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, stunning.
Gorgeous man.
It's funny though, because that was not, like, despite that, like, I find it really funny that a lot of people, at least, like, what I saw happened on Twitter, for me, was like a lot of people were really into Druid. Like, that was the character that I feel like a lot of people.
He's an interesting character.
And being, like, the one that was, like, the surprise. And I think him and Makari together as a duo are, like, what, like, a great pairing. And I think there's something really special about their relationship.
My favorite character was Sprite.
Yeah. And
Sprite was to me, Sprite was the deepest character of them all, because
how do you deal with being a child? But, like that is a really, like, that's deep stuff, you know? And I think that's the thing I like about Phase 4 overall, is, like, you know, shows like Falcon and the Winter Soldier and even WandaVision, like, these are shows that they're Marvel properties, but we're dealing with, like, some really deep stuff, like grief and race, and, like, even just like the plot of Loki. Like, I know we kind of, like, brushed past that show, and that was the show I loved. I stayed up until, like, 2 a.m. when it dropped. Like, even
I'm so sorry. I mean, I wasn't really trying to go too deep into those.
There's a lot of stuff happening, and you're good. Like, I enjoyed it. I know a lot of people didn't, but I also love Tom Hiddleston, and so I was like, anything he does, great. But
he's gonna come back. We were gonna circle back to Loki very soon. We will. There was a reason for that.
Season 2, but, like, I'm, like, excited. You know, But, like, all of these shows deal with, like, this really deep stuff, and even, like, movies as well. And, like, Sprite is, like, you know, an example of that, where there's, like, the sort of deep struggle going on. And even, like, Gemma Chan's character as well.
Yes.
I'm working on her name. The struggle that she goes through with Icarus, and, like, that ending. That was another thing that surprised me too. Again, like, spoilers. I was not walking into this movie, which is, like, in all extents, like, again, it's an origin story. And, like, three of our Eternals out of our big ensemble group are dead by the end of it. I was like,
that was
not, like, I was like,
well, that's the other thing. That was the other thing that I really appreciated about the movie, because we were also introduced to another group of major characters in the cosmic universe, and that is the Celestials. The Celestials are the most powerful beings in the MCU cosmic universe, and in the Marvel cosmic universe, and they most likely will play a big role moving forward, I would think, because I'm telling you this right now, Gabby, those cosmic characters moving forward, especially when the Fantastic Four gets roped into this world.
Yeah.
They're going to go crazy with these characters. It's going to be a very, very exciting time to see characters like maybe the Living Tribunal or the Stranger or Epoch or Eternity. There's so many cool cosmic beings to be exposed to. But one of the few things that I personally wanted to say was another thing that a lot of people got pissed off about was the fact that there was so much gender bending. And I'm saying to my end, and also because when you take a look at the comic characters, because these characters were made in the 1960s and most of them were white men. And I'm basically saying, you know, I'm actually glad that they did what they did for a very interesting reason, because what I loved so much about the Eternals was the fact that they exposed themselves to the globe. So
Yes.
I'm like, make this group look like the globe.
Yes.
Give us someone that looks Indian. Give me someone that looks Latin American. Give me someone that's black. Give me someone that's white.
That's what
Make a
Marvel is
child, a
realizing
man, a
now.
woman, a straight person, a gay person. Give it all to me, because that's the world. That's the
Right,
world we
for
live
sure.
in.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is like that Marvel is doing now, which like again, like Black Widow, I feel like that is a movie we could have gotten way earlier because like all of the other like original 6 Avengers had, you know, movies and like I mean besides Hawkeye, but now he has his show and there's I think gonna be more for that along the way.
Yeah, he always gets the raw end of the stick. I never
Right.
liked that.
Yeah, which I think is like why a lot of people were like, you know, like I think a lot of people were like, because he got the short end of the stick and never really got a lot of development, weren't excited for the Hawkeye show, and then a lot of people ended up really loving it because also
It was
Chris
great.
Evans was very cheery and fun.
It was really great.
But yeah, like Natasha, I think is like one where that felt like really overdue, and so Marvel's realizing like they can give female characters like their own movies, and people will watch that because a lot of their audience is female, and like you know their audience is more than just like straight white men, which I think is what a lot of maybe the comic going audience used to be. But now the MCU is like. It feels almost like if you're not watching Marvel movies, what are you doing? Like there's such a big phenomenon, cultural phenomenon, and they're just like almost impossible to avoid at this point that it's like, if you're making those movies, they should be reflective of the audience that's also watching them as well, which is more than just, you know, like a male audience. And so I think like it's like the Eternals is like the diversity there is great. And I think when you have the director that you do, like it's natural that that type of diversity is going to be included. And I think like again, the cast is phenomenal. Like what a great group of people to play all of these characters and all these different nuances. And Marvel's also doing a lot with, you know, not just like even physical appearances, but like you know, disabilities or like handicaps as well, like with having characters that like use ASL. Like ASL is showing up a lot in Marvel. You know, Hawkeye having like the earpiece and like his, you know, like the representation like there, which is like a comic thing that we're finally now bringing in, and Maya, and now
well, the funny thing,
like
the funny thing about Hawkeye, that was one of the funniest things, because Hawkeye's technically not a super powered being, but he is known to have eyesight like a hawk and ultrasonic hearing. So the fact that he had to be wearing a hearing aid because he had dealt with so many battles, I kind of laughed at that because I'm like, you know something? That makes sense because he's human.
That's a really nice explanation. I wasn't sure if he was supposed to be, if there was a comic iteration where he was deaf or had hearing loss to some extent, because I know that was a representation.
I don't know.
People wanted
Hawkeye hasn't really had his own, has not really carried his own title many times. He's also been one of those characters like Black Widow that you would normally see in an ensemble comic. He was part of the Avengers almost always. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that the kind of story that the Eternals is very different. You just need to understand that that's what this was. And
if you like WandaVision and praise WandaVision for being different and outside of the box, I don't think you can turn around and be like Eternals was garbage, you know, because
no,
it's the same sort of thing of Marvel stepping outside of the box and doing unique, different storytelling that they now have, you know, the privilege to do because they've built the empire that they have.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, I don't know if this group will get a sequel. I mean, like I said,
I think they will. I mean, like, look at the end credit scenes, like, two of them, we introduced Harry Styles as Thanos' brother, Eros.
Yes.
And I think there's the setup there. So I think for sure, like, there's going to be a sequel. I think they, like, you know, intend when they introduce these characters to build them up in bigger ways. But
Dane, on the other hand, also known as the Black Knight.
Yes,
that's a character who's
freaked when I heard the voice at the end and I was like, that's Mahershala Ali and that's Blade.
Well, I never associated Blade, I gotta be honest with you. When I heard that voice, I thought it was Nick Fury trying to get a bunch of Avengers back together again.
No, I think
Because Black Knight's an Avenger. Because one of the few things that we also do know is in the next Thor movie, Zeus is going to be there, which means we're going to get Hercules. And Hercules is also a well-known Avenger. So I am going to be excited because Hercules and Thor, they are like a hilarious duo together. If you thought that Hulk and Thor were great together, Hercules and Thor are great. And knowing that Russell Crowe is going to be
Thunder is going to be wild. It's going to be a trip, especially like if Taika Waititi like went like all out like the way he did for Ragnarok, and he's just like basically saying like but more for Love and Thunder. Like
I hope it's good.
I'm not even prepared for that movie. Like,
yeah, but I'm very excited to know that. I'm glad that Kit Harington was chosen to play Black Knight. I'm very curious.
Richard Madden being together, like,
yes,
that was very like a
very curious to see how he's going to play into the story. I don't believe he's going to have his own movie, but I know he's going to be in either an Avengers movie or he'll be in the Blade movie. All I know is that I want to see how Black Knight is going to be brought into this world, because that's another thing. I'm glad that they're also now going into some of these third string, fourth string characters that not that many people know about. I mean, look, I know for a solid fact that the Fantastic Four and the X-Men are going to overshadow some of these heroes, but I know at the same time that every single time one of these TV shows or movies is going to be made, the people that are a part of them are going to give 110%. I mean, for crying out loud, they made 2 Ant-Man movies, and those are 2 of the most entertaining movies in the library.
I'm excited for the third one. Like Quantumania, I think is going to be like
that might be where the Fantastic Four shows up. As a matter of fact, there are rumors that that's where the Fantastic Four has been all the time. They've been stuck in the quantum realm.
Interesting.
Because Reed Richards plays with that place. He does. So I'm curious.
Yeah.
All right. So Loki came out and we were introduced to the overall timeline, and we saw it start to break after Sylvie and Loki had that encounter with this version of Kang. We don't know what version of Kang is going to be featured in Quantumania, but we did get to see the consequences in full force in the movie of 2021.
Yeah, No Way Home.
Spider-Man No Way Home was fantastic. It was fantastic.
Good. Yeah, oh my gosh, this movie, what a roller coaster. I like it's like what they were able to accomplish feels like it is its own like in mini Infinity War or Endgame, like, you know, bringing back like all of these like Spider-Man villains from over the decades, like Willem Dafoe. Oh my God, that man put his whole chest in that performance as Green Goblin. And, I like like Alfred Molina and Jamie Foxx, and like
they got Thomas.
Like if you grew up with Spider-Man movies, like it's so nostalgic, and it's just
that is scary because of the fact that this year is the 20th anniversary of the very first Spider-Man film hitting theaters. That is crazy. So the fact that they really wanted to finish this trilogy of Spider-Man films, or at least this trilogy storyline, because there are going to be more. They've already announced that Tom Holland has signed on for 3 more, and that's what I keep saying. They finally did the right thing. They finally cast a truly young actor to play Peter, so they knew that they would have him for the longevity, because, look, it was great to see Toby and Andrew back. Because, those 2 guys were almost 30 when they were cast as Spider-Man. So the fact that Tom is there
came back was how well done. I think, like, also I was not expecting it to be in a scene with like MJ and Ned, but like the way that Ned is able to open the portals, and even like that being like that feels like there could be something there, like. And like the minute the portal opened and we saw like the Spider, I was like, this is it. I was like, this is how they're gonna do it.
I mean,
so many people spent so long. I think it was almost a bummer too that so many people spent so long speculating, being like, "Are Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire going to show up in these movies?" And like Andrew Garfield had to be constantly asked about it while he was doing press for Tick Tick Boom, and like denied it, like his life depended upon it, which it probably did, knowing Marvel. And so like I think that was like a bit of a bummer because it was like so much speculation, and then like looking at the trailers and being like, "Oh, that's where they were cropped out." And so like when it finally happened, I think like it was satisfying, and like the audience reaction in the theater I was in was insane.
Oh yeah, everyone went bonkers when all these I mean, like even though we were in a theater with so little people, you could still hear people just being so excited to see all of these characters come back. I mean,
and even the emotional moments between the three of them, like when they're talking about like, you know, the final moment where they were like, you know, Uncle Ben, like he said the words, "With great power comes great responsibility," like the, you know, sharing that moment, and like even some of like the fun witty banter, like the three of them just work so well together. It feels so natural.
I think one of the best parts of that film was the part where the three of them were just hanging out on the Statue of Liberty, and how Tom's Spider-Man and Tobey's Spider-Man tell Andrew Spider-Man, "You're amazing, you're relevant," because those movies got so much crap.
Yes, and now we're in this Andrew Garfield renaissance where everyone is like, he's great, and like I cannot like go anywhere. Like I open up like TikTok, like I was like, I cannot like escape. Like we are in the Andrew Garfield renaissance again. He just won a Golden Globe for Tick Tick Boom. Like it feels like he's
a great actor. Have you
appreciation? Angels in America, he won a Tony Award for, which was so deserved. Like
have you ever seen his film from Martin Scorsese? Have you ever seen Silence?
I have not, but I've been hearing things about it.
It's a fantastic film. Him and Adam Driver are amazing in that movie, and that's one of the great. I mean, like I've been a fan of Andrew Garfield's ever since I saw The Social Network.
Yeah.
So I've always been one of his biggest fans. But yes, it was even amazing to see them even getting Reese Ifans and Thomas Hayden Church to come back as well. It was like we were hearing that Alfred Molina was coming back. We knew Willem Dafoe was coming back. We knew Jamie Foxx was coming back. But I was like, please tell me they got the others back. I mean, look, even though it was an amazing post-credit scene, I sort of kind of wanted Topher Grace to come back too.
Yeah, I did but I think it made sense because a lot of people were talking about when Venom came out, one of the end credit scenes in Venom was like Tom Holland Spider-Man. And so I knew that like there was going to have to be something. So like when that end credit scene happened, I was like, and so then like the little piece of the symbiote that gets left behind. And I absolutely I believe, because it took me like at least 20 minutes. And I was like, who was the person behind the bar? Who was the person behind the bar? Who was the person behind the bar? That wasn't Venom, but like the bartender. And I was like, why do I recognize him? And it took once my friend started driving, and then I just had the light bulb moment where you could probably just see the light bulb above my head. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's, Danny Rojas from Ted Lasso, which I've been watching on Apple. And I was like,
oh wow,
it makes sense to me that because he is, I would say, an up-and-coming actor. Ted Lasso has gotten a whole bunch of recognition recently. It's a great show. Just like Jason Sudeikis just crushes it.
But there's still a couple of things that I was sort of a little upset about, because the one thing that I really thought that we were getting from this movie was we were finally going to get Spider-Man versus the Sinister Six, and we still didn't get it. Yeah. I know that Marvel knows the fans want that to happen so badly. It's also very weird about the fact, because the one thing that never sat well with me in regards to these three Super Spider-Man films. Now, don't get me wrong. I love them. They're great. But it is so weird for me to see this version of Spider-Man without a Harry Osborn and without an Oscorp. It's weird. And
I feel like that may be coming in this new trilogy.
I hope
that they opened it up. Because even I think they probably did it intentionally, that they have oh my gosh, Willem Dafoe's character come in.
Norman.
And say there's no he's stumbling in, he's like, there's no Oscorp here, someone was living in my home. And I think they did that almost intentionally to say that it's very likely that Oscorp could come in and whenever we
probably in the multiverse of madness.
And and that will be a new thing, and that will be the trilogy, because he doesn't have MJ and Ned anymore, based on the ending of this movie. And so
I gotta ask you a question. Okay, so we all love Ned. We do. Yes. Now, do you remember the line in the movie where he said to Peter, "I really hope I never become one of your enemies"?
Yes.
Did you know that he's supposed to be one of his enemies?
Yeah, because people were were talking about that and we're being like, oh, he's gonna be Hobgoblin.
Yep.
Like theories. And
You
I was
know
like,
everything.
also,
I'm glad.
yeah, and I know they were talking about him like having magic, and so like when he was opening the portals, and it didn't seem like it was just the ring that he had on, because like when he has that interaction with Stephen Strange, Stephen's reaction seems like almost like he's mildly impressed, which seems like a lot for Stephen to like give in that moment to a character like Ned, who would consider like even he would dismiss even more than Peter, I feel like, in that situation. So that tells me like there's something going on with Ned as a character, that he has some ability, that like they're setting up for something.
I hope so.
For him. And like even Ned wearing the cape, like the cape comes and saves him, like in that moment when he falls. Like I was like, there's things happening for that character. And even I feel like MJ as well, like there's more to her background. Like we get like little dabbles of something where I'm like, I think there's more to explore for those
characters. The thing that made me so happy about this movie was because they finally got it. Well, again, I did this the first time when I reviewed this on my own. They got it right so many times in these MCU films, but you know how many times these big budget comic book films try to make a movie where they want to bring a whole bunch of characters in, they just never manage to get it right. Like nobody gets the right screen time, the plot gets complete. Everything was done perfectly. It was well done.
And I think also like again the payoffs as well. Like I think two of the biggest moments for me like in this movie that like really got me was like the final moment that we got with Aunt May. Marissa Tomei just nailed, like, you know, that she gets to give that line, with great power comes great responsibility. You know, it's not Uncle Ben, it's Aunt May. And I was like, that feels so deserved that she be the character to say that to him, and he dies. And that scene was so emotional. Like everyone, including myself, was in tears. Like it was
the scene. The scene where my heart was basically stopping was his final showdown with Green Goblin, and how he literally is trying to kill him. Like never, because we've seen Tom as Spider-Man since Civil War. I never thought we were ever going to see him go that dark, because Spider-Man does go very dark in the comics, very dark.
If, like the trauma,
if this little post-credit scene with the symbiote ends up being the Black Costume saga finally done right, you will see Spider-Man go dark, and I'm guaranteeing you they're gonna make Tom Holland do a dance thing just because.
Just to meme it,
But I know they're going to do it right. It's going to be crazy good to see where Tom Holland goes next. I also loved the Miles foreshadow, because Miles will be there. Miles will be there eventually.
Yeah.
And I don't know, because as far as I'm concerned, Miles is already in the current 616 based on Donald Glover's scene in Homecoming. So he's there. But the thing that was very interesting about this movie was when I finished it, the funny thing is, I'm very glad that very soon I will have a new floor in my basement, which means all those DVDs can finally go back to where they belong.
Nice. Lookback, by the way, Muppet Show, great.
Oh, thank you very much. Another Disney property. But what I'm really saying to myself is, you know, I don't have Spider-Man 3 in my collection. I don't have the Amazing Spider-Man films. I haven't even seen the 2 Venom films. This movie made all those Spider-Man films relevant. Like, you now should watch these for more insight into the MCU. I love that.
Jameson, like, they managed to put him in, and obviously, like, I don't think he carries, like, a significant role. Like, he's not necessarily, like, critical to the plot. But still, it's just, like, fun to have him there. You know?
Yeah.
And just, because, like, what a phenomenal performance. And I think, like, that character has not changed.
Oh, J.K. Simmons. You know something? I didn't know who J.K. Simmons was until I saw the first Spider-Man film. And now he's one of my favorite actors. I love the fact that he has now officially.
Like, whoa, like that performance.
Wait, do you mean Whiplash?
Yes, Whiplash. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
No, I love Spotlight and Whiplash. Those are 2 of my favorite movies. Yeah. Him and Whiplash is incredible. But I love the fact that he can now say, I have played J. Jonah Jameson and Commissioner Gordon. What are you gonna do? You know, he's a fantastic actor. But I also like I said, it was a great movie. I wanted a little more, though. That's just because of the fact that I thought we were going to get a little more. And now I'm just very curious now about Morbius, because Michael Keaton's in it. So
Yeah,
he's going to obviously be the Vulture again.
That movie has suffered immensely from like all the delays. I think it was supposed to come out towards the end of this month, and then pushed back to May. So that movie's been delayed so many times, even more than Black Widow was ended up initially being delayed. And so I really hope that movie ends up being worthwhile in terms of like its, contribution to the MCU, because there are some Spider-Man references and stuff, and I definitely am intrigued to see that movie.
Well, I will say, if we're going to give Spider-Man No Way Home the true credit it deserves, it's the fact that it really went out of its way to tie a lot of Marvel properties together. And we forgot about one of the other great little things that did happen in this movie. Yes. Matt Murdock showed up.
Yes! Oh, that was great too. And it was fun because people in my theater freaked out about that. And I hadn't started watching Daredevil yet.
Charlie Cox is great as Matt Murdock.
I love him. He's great. Like, again, like what I have watched of Daredevil, I'm like, he's phenomenal. And even just like the little moment where he did show up was fantastic. And I guess, and I'm excited for him. And I think like there are plans to now, because we've gotten now 2 characters from those Daredevil Netflix show incorporated into the MCU, that like I think there's going to be obviously potential to see him again.
I'd like to see I personally want to see all the Defenders come back, because one of the other things that apparently has been leaked right now is the Defenders, which is actually a team in Marvel Comics that Doctor Strange puts together. I'd like to see Daredevil really be played with a little bit more. I want to see Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and Iron Fist all come into this story. And I love listening to the rumors. I love the speculations. I love what people have said about the Fantastic Four. I love what some people have already said about the possible post-credit scene in Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness. I don't even know if you heard about this. Apparently, people are hearing that at the very end of the post-credit scene, Wanda is going to be summoned by Professor Xavier.
That would be, yeah.
So because there's all the speculation, like because she was the one in the comic books that wiped all the mutants off the face of the earth, is she going to be the one that's going to bring all the mutants into the universe? Like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So
I think there's so much, like, I think like almost even like it's a lot like to think about and process when you think about where the MCU is going. And I think like, we thought the Infinity Saga was big, but I think like
it's going to get bigger.
It's only getting bigger and better. Yeah.
I think we're getting Secret Wars. I think that's our next big story.
Yeah, because I know we're getting Secret Invasion as well. That's another one of the Marvel like Disney Plus shows that I'm really excited for.
Me too.
I think it's just there's so many things happening from so many different angles, and I think it's just going to be really big. I will say the one thing I would be remiss to not mention about No Way Home that I want to quickly cycle back to, because like talking about making these like previous Spider-Man movies relevant where you need to go and watch them. I think one of the like best payoffs of this movie that a lot of people were theorizing about, that like I think was way more powerful than like any of us could have theorized about, was this moment where MJ falls off the rafters.
Yes.
And instead of like Tom's Spider-Man being the one to catch her, it's Spider-Man.
People were very happy about that.
Yeah, and just like even like it's the moment that happens, with the fact that they sit with them for a few seconds after the fact, and you can just see the visible emotion on Andrew's face, and just the knowing that like he wasn't able to save Gwen, but he was able to save this version of MJ, Peter, and like that was, it was just such a well done moment. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, if you hadn't watched those original Spider-Man movies, like you wouldn't know. I mean, they had a little bit of conversation about it beforehand to set it up in case you didn't watch the movies, but like, still,
like I said, it gives you incentive to actually watch these movies now. Like, people are actually going to start, and I think that's great, because I think this was John Watts basically saying, there were some really good Spider-Man movies that came out before the MCU, because what we need to really do, what really needs to be given credit where credit is due, is all of those comic book films, particularly those Marvel films that came out from like 2000 with X-Men all the way until Iron Man, those Spider-Man films, those 2 Fantastic Four films, those X-Men movies. These are the reasons why we have the MCU now. And it's going to be such a great payoff to see these characters finally join in this brilliant universe that has been created. And one of my personal favorite scenes in Spider-Man No Way Home was the end before the credits. I love the fact that he made that ultimate sacrifice, but after that, he gets his apartment, and then you see the sewing machine, and you see that he made his very own Spider-Man costume without the gadgets and gizmos that Tony Stark gave him, and now he really has gone back to being your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I love that. I really, really like that, because that was actually one of the few things that I was sort of hoping about. Like I was saying, like, I really hope that after Civil War, I really hope that Peter does really come into his own and makes his own costume. So the fans, this is called truly giving the fans what the fans want. And clearly the box office numbers show it. I mean, I will still say, though, that all those people that are saying that the other Phase 4 movies were nothing special, I'm not going to agree with them, because I still think that all 4 of these films were very well done and good watches. And if anything, Ben Kenobi said when Luke first figured out how to battle with a lightsaber and he could feel the Force, "You've taken your first step into a larger world," he said. And that's the thing. We've already seen a larger world with these first 20-something films, but as a comic book fan, I was saying, oh, you really think this is as big as it's going to get? You have no idea how much further you have to go.
And I think it's because Marvel really spent like those first 20-something worlds doing the hard legwork of being like, let's build our world. And, now they have Fox, and they've acquired all of these acquisitions and have really like done the pioneering of building them stuff up, that now they can do these like big, grand, extraordinary things and do stuff out of the box, and like really just like the possibilities are endless now, I feel like.
Yeah.
And I feel like they have so much like uncharted territory, things that they haven't even touched yet. It's going to be wild. Like I am so pumped for everything that's to come. And it's like every year there's like a nice docket of releases where it's like there's not going to be, hopefully, fingers crossed, unless something devastating happens, like another dry year for Marvel. It just feels like full steam ahead with all of the content we're going to be getting.
Well, before we officially end this, and by the way, Gabby, this has been absolutely wonderful. I'm really hoping that this is the first of many. I would love to do one of these recaps with you every year. It's going to be a very interesting year for me in 2022, because unfortunately I will be missing most of these Marvel films in theaters, but for obviously very positive reasons, which is the reason why I was so upset that Doctor Strange got pushed back to May.
I know. I was also bummed as well, because that's the week before my graduation. So I'm like, will I be able to see this movie during finals week?
As someone who was going to see the MCU films, I went to the original Iron Man in 2008 and never looked back. My streak will officially be snapped this year, like I said, for very positive reasons.
Yeah.
But I am very thankful that Disney Plus is something that I have now, because the good thing, if there's anything I can say about the pandemic that was positive, it was the fact that the movie industry has now said we don't need to wait so long to release these movies onto streaming. So the fact that I will be able to just have to wait about a month or two for the movies to show up on Disney Plus, I'll still see them. I'll still review them. Would I have been upset over the fact that I would have not been able to see them on the big screen? Of course I will. But these are petty things compared to the fact that I am going to be eventually teaching a new soul on this world about these amazing things that are comic book characters. Boy or girl, I want this child to know what the father enjoys. And even if you don't like it, at least appreciate the fact that your father likes something different,
Yeah.
So
like, Marvel is one of those franchises. Like I definitely like it's so like wild to even think about like new generations coming in, and there's all of this territory that's already been built, and it's like we don't even know what Marvel is going to look like. But I think it's growing so much, and again, like what I said before, it feels like a mainstream thing now, where it's like, if you're not into Marvel, like you are like
not just Marvel, it's all comics at this point in time. Because when I was growing when I was growing up, I was picked on for liking all this stuff. It was nerdy. Well, now it's not nerdy anymore.
mainstream, yeah, for sure. Like,
that's what makes me, that's why that's why it's like, it's nice to go into a comic book store. And I mean, like, that's where you sit down with the people that have known these characters for 20, 30 years. And it's, it's still very interesting. When I go to my comic book store every Wednesday to pick up my new books, you don't see that many kids. You actually see 30, 40, 50, 60-year-olds, because it's hard to imagine that these characters have been in the lexicon of popular culture for almost a century now. I mean, we're celebrating a ton of Marvel anniversaries this year. We're celebrating the 60th anniversaries of Hulk, Thor, Spider-Man, and the Fantastic Four.
Wild, yeah.
So these characters have been around for so many years, and Marvel is celebrating in a massive way. And these movies and these TV shows, I mean, we'll definitely talk via Messenger. We'll talk about how we're feeling about the new shows. I'm dying to see what Moon Knight's going to be. I am dying to see She-Hulk. I'm excited for Miss Marvel.
What comes next, because I feel like there's going to probably be another Disney Plus show before Multiverse of Madness. At least I hope so, because I know, like, that's like 5 months away.
The one thing that I am the most excited, something, this is a great way to close it out. When it comes to all the stuff that's coming out in 2022, what is the one thing that you are looking forward to seeing the most, that is actually coming in this series of films and TV shows?
Cool. My goodness. I would say, like, now that we've gotten it's not confirmation, but it's like, I feel like this is my, like, Tobey Maguire, like Andrew Garfield. I'm excited for Multiverse of Madness, mainly because I wasn't like a big fan of the first Doctor Strange film, but I feel like he's gotten so much character development in films outside of his own in the time since that first film. And I think that movie is going to be so big. And because I feel like we've been teasing the multiverse for forever, like all of these like projects like WandaVision, and it's like, what if like we've gotten the teases of it coming, and then we always find a way to manage to like seal a rift in the end. And even like No Way Home, they have the big rift and it looks like there's all these beings coming in, and then like they do the spell and that solves that. Like we've been skating past it, but still talking about its presence. And I feel like finally getting to that point, and I think just the implications for that movie, and also like if Loki and Sylvie and Owen Wilson show up, because there's been talks of like their stunt doubles being on set, so that's a possibility. And seeing like where that takes like season 2 of Loki, because obviously like naturally, because I am a big Tom Hiddleston fan and just love Loki as a character, just like I'm like thrilled to get to see more from him. And also like Love and Thunder, I think, just because Taika Waititi, like just watching that man do
I saw him. I know he didn't direct this movie, but I saw him in my favorite movie of 2021, and that was Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds. That movie was so fun. I enjoyed it so much. You gotta see Free Guy. You've got to see Free Guy. You are gonna love it.
That movie I've seen is the scene with Chris Evans where and I was like, man. I was like, okay, that in itself won me over.
Well,
and I've been meaning to, so that
Okay, so the thing that I am excited for the most is a specific character, because this was a character that I have been waiting to see show up in the MCU, just because of how he is tied to the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, and even the X-Men, because he is a mutant, and we're finally getting him in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, Namor the Submariner.
Yes.
Namor was one of the very first characters that was created in Marvel Comics. They weren't even called Marvel Comics at the time. This character has been in the lexicon since 1938. And the fact that Marvel's being a little ballsy to have Wakanda Forever come out around the same time that DC's Aquaman 2 is coming out.
Curious as to whether that movie will get pushed back or not, because also filming difficulties, because I don't even know if it's resumed filming yet, because Letitia Wright had the whole onset injury and pandemic restrictions and travel. So I just feel like that movie is Black Panther was such a huge entity, and the first film did so well, and Chadwick Boseman carried that, and now that he's no longer with us, having to adapt to those challenges, and
I'm curious
to see what the final product of that becomes, because I think that movie has faced so many uphill battles.
I just think that it's going to be such an interesting idea, because you've got two powerhouse comic book cities. You've got Wakanda against Atlantis. It's just going to be so interesting to see Namor just show up. Like, because again, it's like, where has he been all this time? You know? Yeah. So was he brought in because of Doctor Strange? Is he brought in because Wanda possibly brought mutants into the MCU 616 universe? The possibilities are endless, but all I know is that Namor is a staple, and I want to see this character show up, and I want to see him get his own movie, plain and simple. So,
and then I'll say in terms of Disney Plus shows, like I'm very excited for Secret Invasion because I'm keeping hopes that like we go back to S.H.I.E.L.D. and, you know, I'm excited to see Nick Fury again and setting up for Captain Marvel 2. And I think getting some questions as to what's been going on with Nick Fury because Far From Home really gave us like some question marks as to like where has Nick Fury been? And I think No Way Home gives like another little question mark about that because I think is it the one that no, it's somebody in the jail office. Somebody mentions like Nick Fury's been off planet for at least a year, something like that. And so it's like clearly there's people that are in the know of what's going on with Nick Fury, but we my theory is that he's been off planet since maybe the end of Winter Soldier, because definitely my thought is that who we see in Age of Ultron is not Nick Fury because of the horizontal toast. And he mentions in Captain Marvel, he doesn't put his toast horizontally. And that felt very like intentional to make you go back to that film and be like,
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. So that was definitely one of the things that's been like weighing on my mind. And I'm just like Samuel L. Jackson. And again, like my hope for like maybe Phil Coulson shows up and getting like some references to S.H.I.E.L.D. and
the TV shows, definitely most excited for Moon Knight, just because he's a character that I just read about in the books. I loved his character. I am very curious to see this dark universe because his show will definitely pave the way for Blade. That's a definite yes. I'm also very curious to see how they're going to do Blade because have you seen the original trilogy?
I watched like the first half an hour of it. I'm needing to watch it. I feel like I need to like
because those are good movies.
Yeah, Wesley Snipes. Like it's definitely like I know people love those movies, and I try watching them, and I think I need to be in the right mindset. And I wanted to.
Yeah. Definitely the second one is the best one because Guillermo del Toro directed that movie.
Yes, and that was one of the reasons that appealed to me because I know I'm a big fan of Crimson Peak, which is also a Guillermo del Toro product.
Gabby, this was great. I'm glad that we got to really talk about this in full details. Oh, you're welcome. I'm really hoping.
It was not like I feel like we really went in. Like I'm looking at the clock and I was like, we've been talking for a hot second.
Well, that's the thing. There's so many great things.
Yeah, when you're talking about like an entire year's worth of Marvel, like you could spend hours, and I feel like you know we even just like scratch the surface. Like it's
absolutely
so much, and it's so fun to get to sit down and discuss these movies with someone who's like in the shows and like just the MCU in general, with someone who's just like is passionate about you know the products and what's coming out and the whole story.
Well that's the thing. It's also just because of the fact that you know as someone who read comics when he was a kid, started reading comics again as an adult, and reading a lot of back issues as well, really reading some of these old stories, it's just like knowing all the source material that is out there, it just makes me more excited for the kinds of things that these movies are going to give us, because I'd love to see, because there's been so many attempts sometimes, and sometimes like for crying out loud, Fox tried to do the Dark Phoenix saga in X-Men twice and failed both times. So I'm like, will the MCU finally get it right, you know? But anyway, everybody, thank you very much for watching. I hope that you all enjoyed. It was a great conversation. And like I said, I'm hoping that this will be the first of many, but I'm hoping that you all enjoy all that the MCU and yes, the DCEU have to offer in 2022, because we also do talk about them here on our channel, as well as the animated world of DC. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching, and we will see you in the next one.